Media ownership in the U.S. has probably been the most high-profile, the most contentious, and the most really widely discussed media policy issue that we've seen over the past decade. It became particularly pronounced in 2002 and 2003 when the FCC was conducting its biannual review of its media ownership regulations. And for the first time, really, the public took notice of this to a degree that it hadn't in the past. The public interest and advocacy community became incredibly mobilized around the issue, and to this day, as you know, the controversy surrounding the media ownership issue persists because none of the policies under consideration in 2002 and 2003 were resolved in a way that our judicial system found satisfactory. So the FCC has really been sent back to the drawing board, so to speak, on the media ownership issue. The presumption being that the Commission would like to relax the bulk of our within market and cross market and cross technology media ownership limits, things like newspaper and television cross ownership, things like the number of television stations that can be owned in a single market, rules of that sort. There's been less discussion within the U.S. about issues of foreign ownership. Those rules have not been up for reconsideration, and as you might imagine, the political climate in the U.S. these days is one that is sort of across the aisle in terms of both parties not really disagreeing that they would be concerned about foreign ownership. But on the issue of ownership concentration in general, there is a very strong, for the most part, partisan split. On the Democrat side, more resistance to media ownership regulations being loosened. On the Republican side, a greater willingness to see those regulations be relaxed or eliminated. So, as often happens in the U.S., the policy debate has taken a strong partisan turn. The real issue going forward is what kinds of research can or should be brought to bear to help illuminate this question. Policymakers have been somewhat stumped as to the best analytical framework to apply to this issue, and some would argue, which I think is a very important point, some would argue that diversification of the ownership of the means of communications is something that should be a policy priority regardless of what empirical studies tell us about how it might affect the content that we receive. So it's an interesting set of conflicts between social scientific research approaches and approaches more grounded more firmly in particular sets of political values. And it's really hard to say how this is ultimately going to get resolved.